All right, let's move forward. We're going to be going into our discussion segment for this one, and our discussion this week is the best and worst adaptations, and when does Hollywood get it right or wrong? So first off, for this one, we're going to be going over some of the good adaptations we have, some of the bad adaptations we have, because it seems like it's something that I can't tell you how many times I've told people like, "Oh, that's based off a comic book, or that's based off a video game," and it's getting better and better, in my opinion. What do you guys think makes a good adaptation? When it sticks strictly to the source material, or when they try to and reinvent it? What do you think, Jonathan?
I think it has to be reinvented. I think sticking to the source material, you get the same thing in a different medium, which doesn't always translate well. If you take a comic book and you're making it, shot for shot in a live action, series, it just doesn't play the same. It wasn't made for that, that medium. But I think also it's largely based on fan expectations from the source material, because if you make something that is such a cult classic, like I'm going to say this thing and it's going to sound like a sin. If they were to remake Back to the Future right now,
what a sin.
Exactly. People would hate it because everybody loves it so much that to remake it, you're going to inevitably butcher it in some way. Right. So like if you take, something that is so dear to people and do your best with it, it's still not going to meet their expectations. So the trick to me, and I'm nobody in the business, but to find something that is good but not thoroughly exploited or not, saturated in the market. For example, the first Iron Man movie was so good because Iron Man was a comic book, but it wasn't like everybody's talking about it all the time right now. It wasn't a real big hit. It was good. It was just one of them. But then, when you do Superman, there's a little more judgment around that because he's a little more well known. So yeah, I think it's getting a source material that is adaptable more than whether you adapt it or not. I think you have to adapt it, but you have to get one that's easily adaptable without offending everybody or making people go crazy.
Yeah.
I remember specifically with Iron Man being in a comic book shop after the movie released and thinking like, this is like a new era of what movies should look like. And there was some nerd in there who was all like, yeah, but this isn't what Iron Man looks like in the comics. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I have never even opened an Iron Man comic book, and this guy's worried about it not being accurate. Who the hell knows who Iron Man is? But now everybody does,
You're like, the comic book had it wrong, bud.
Yeah, that's like Guardians of the Galaxy. Everybody loves Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I would love to beat the person who had a Guardians of the Galaxy comic book before the movies came out. I don't know anybody. Yeah.
Let me. I'll throw my hat in this. So I think a good adaptation, obviously, and what we've seen it like really recent, and I'll name it shortly after, is that they are pulling like the beloved parts of what we love about that source material, but like doing their own thing with it. It doesn't have to be the same story, because then we're just going to critique it like crazy. Mm-hmm. A movie I'm kind of like referencing right now is the Sonic movies and how successful they have been. Mm-hmm. So the Sonic, the characters themselves, like to the T, right? They're perfect. And like their origin part of it also. But then you got someone like funny that can pull off Dr. Eggman, Jim Carrey. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be the typical, they wanted the chaos gems, but it doesn't have to go the same route like we usually see in a movie. So like, obviously they did that right. And now we got three now? I'm about to lean on 4 now with the ending of 3 that explains like what we're going to expect from number 4.
Yeah.
But then you have, and I hate to say it because when I was little, I used to watch this quite often. The old Super Mario movie, right? Super Mario Bros.
I loved that movie though.
I loved
it. At the
it,
time,
but
I
again,
did.
93.
Yeah, but you got like kind of like a confusing plot. It could be at some points, and then you have like Miss what do you call it? Miss oh my god,
Peach.
Oh my gosh, no. Character miscasting.
Miscasting. I'm thinking like Miss as the first name part. Miss Peach.
No, I couldn't find the word. Kind of like the tones too. Like it's very different than what it really originally is. But again, it's a movie that I kind of liked when I was little. But if we were to see it again, we were like, "What the fuck is this?" And then compared to that masterpiece that the animated movie that came out, then it's like, okay, that was perfect to me with Bowser. Okay. Bowser always steals Peach, right? Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
But did we ever get like a love life story with him? So it's like, again, you're taking like the best parts of what we love and bringing it over, and then adding something new to it. Where like now you got the Bowser song "Singing a Peach" like a hit when that came
Yeah.
out, right? So yeah,
But
you
I
got to
think-
throw a twist to it, but still like pull the things that are beloved.
I think that movie is a direct like depiction of 90s movies too, though. It was the style back then. It's that with the, a story from a very underdeveloped game at the time. Now there's so much more Mario content. It's been shaped a lot more. So the new one is definitely based on newer Mario games. And like, it's been very thoroughly adapted. Now, if we look at it from today, it looks kind of like a steampunk movie. So if you were to try to remake it as Mario, a steampunk type movie, that would fit a lot better. You could remake that version of it. But like I was saying, like there's so much more Mario now that that was just based on like the NES Mario, I think, or maybe the N64. But
and Mario 3
Mario
was on the horizon. Like it was in development. I think that came out in 91. So it was 93. But that's a really good example of them just kind of ditching a lot of what they do know about Mario. Like we know what Toad looks like. He doesn't look like that. We know what, and like Bowser's not a dinosaur, but they made him a dinosaur.
Yeah.
You know, so there was all kinds of things they took liberties with that I think turned away most fans. What's with this goo in the city? Why are we in this city? Stuff like that were just totally. Now, does it stand alone as a fun romp outside of that? Like I just watched that movie again a couple years ago for the Sloop podcast, and revisiting it is like, this is nearly unwatchable. Actually, this is pretty bad. Through the lens of being a kid, it was like, oh, I don't have any other Mario content. I need this. But as an adult, you're watching, you're like, this is, I mean, even the acting's bad in this thing. And it had John Leguizamo, who I think is amazing now. But yeah, it is pretty awful. I want to throw my hat on like what makes a good adaptation is you take what is like the heart of the reason we like it. So, The Last of Us. It's that survival and leaning on a father and daughter relationship. Let's go back to the D&D. We were talking about D&D. It's the idea that you live in a fantasy world, but there's like this little wild, crazy stories in a band, like a little party, like weird things happen, fun things happen in a little party. If you could pull that out, you could almost change everything around it. And so for that Dungeons & Dragons movie, where we're watching these two that right on that one guy, I remember like his name was like Jonathan, but not Jonathan. They think he's going to be talking about them, and he's like writing. He's an Erico. They write him outside the window, and it's like, we're going to pardon you. It's like such a classic thing. And as a DM, there's so many times where I'm like, guys, if you guys waited for like 2 seconds, you would have heard you're fine. But instead, Daniel's crashing through a window because he thinks it's going to look cool, and he rolled good on a dice. That pulled at the heart of what makes Dungeons & Dragons good, and then like wrapped everything else around it. So if you can nail that, you're good. Like Game of Thrones, if you can nail the political drama, that's really good in the books. There it is. So many times they forget that. Like the Avatar movie that came out in like 2010. First off, you changed Aang's name. There was absolutely no reason for that.
Yeah.
And then there's like, you guys don't have any of the whimsy or the heart that's in this thing that makes us love it. Instead, you're just showing things bending. It made no sense.
Do you think there's too much? So you brought up Last of Us. Do you think there's too much of a copy and paste? Because I feel like a lot. Okay, so I'm going to compare the two. So Last of Us just really felt like the video game adaptation, and I feel like there was too much that was really added. But you had Wicked, which was pulled from obviously the play, but the movie brought like, okay, now we have more dialogue in between the characters. We can kind of fall in love with the characters a little bit more. They're building more of a relationship because they're conversating instead of just like singing songs and whatnot. Do you feel like there's too much? Like they need to break that a little bit? You think Last of Us should maybe add a little something to it, or are fans just going to be pissed off and upset about it?
When I think about that, I think about Lion King a lot. When they did the live action Lion King movie, the first one, our complaint was that it was too much like the story was too much like the regular movie.
Direct shot for shot, yeah.
Yeah, but if it wasn't, we'd complain about that too. And so I think for The Last of Us, there's a lot of people who don't know about that game at all, and they're being woken up to this amazing story. Yeah, but for Wicked, there were a lot of things that by the original medium, being a play, being a musical, that they probably didn't have the ability to show a lot of dialogue. And what is it that I said beforehand? It pulls at the heart. What is that relationship between the rich girl or like the famous popular girl, whatever, and then the outcast being pulled out and put out on screen. There we go. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of like dichotomy, the Mean Girls aspect of it. That being amplified, I think, is a good. That movie is. God damn it! It's really. I'm actually looking forward to Wicked Part 2.
If you need to know, I know. I just saw the play, so.
Did you really? Okay.
I can tell you all the spoilers.
So let's go ahead and look at a couple of successful adaptations, and then we're going to look at some of that are bad. I'll start us off on a really great one. I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You just can't do better at that. I think it's as faithful as you possibly can be. There are things where I think an adaptation knows that like that won't translate well. So like Tom Bombadil, a lot of people complain like, why is Tom Bombadil not in this? I don't think he would have done well in this movie. First off, he breaks up the story pretty wildly, and he's kind of a whimsical floating like a Q character from Star Trek. So he wouldn't fit well with this like large saga we're setting up. In the books, you have time to breathe with that, but in the movie you did. And I think overall, perfect adaptation, probably the best one I could think of. You guys have any good ones?
It's so good that you assume like the Lord of the Rings was a movie first, you know?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yeah.
Man, no, I thought mine already. Like Sonic was perfect to me. Which was great.
I'm surprised you're not mentioning Harry Potter, Squeaks.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
I was waiting for that one. Yeah, specifically, I think the Prisoner of Azkaban. I think is the best one, the best version that's adapted.
Yeah. The things that they took away from the books and the movies that were like kind of like I don't care, right? I think I said it before. In the first one, there was like a specific ghost. They cast the ghost. They did all the work. The actor was upset that he wasn't in the movie. But then when you read it like from the book into the movie, like I could see him gone. So maybe it was the right decision. There's a second Quidditch game in the book. Felt extremely rushed. Maybe we didn't need it, so they didn't do it. And I felt like, the things that they took away from the book to the movie were perfect. And it's just smart decisions. So you don't have to pull everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. With Prisoner of Azkaban, they changed how the reveal happens, right? With the mouse or with the rat being.
It was some. Yeah, what was it though? Do you remember?
They changed. I think they changed the reveal to where it happened beforehand, but you weren't like it wasn't Harry being surprised in that moment, and so it was like, well, they're making it more cinematic in the movie to where it's like a surprise for both us and Harry at the same time. I think that was a good move, like kind of just that you needed that, and then the way the time turner situation worked, I thought was shot perfectly. That's my favorite of the Harry Potter movies, and
it's almost like the stuff that they took away were right decisions, you know?
Yeah. I'll give you another really good one for me. Oh, sorry. You got one, Joe?
No, Game of Thrones, of course, is
Yep.
Everything Game of Thrones has been good so far. No complaints. But like I remember you reading the books too, and you would tell me chapter by chapter kind of what was going on in the story and stuff, and then us watching it together too. It's like I know there's a lot that probably didn't make it on screen. But it takes that kind of changing things to fit better. Like, I mean, they did cut out some really good stuff, but it's like Catelyn
wait for that
being beheaded and then resurrected with Lady Stoneheart and a big cut on her neck and stuff. It's like that looks really cool, and visually that would be great for us. And it's such a great elevates the story. It puts so much more investment in that character, but for the mainstream audience that's just tiptoeing into this whole fantasy world that might be a little bit past their limit, might be pushing past the edge. So I think that's why they had to dial back. They had to take the tops off of some of the story that was a little too out there, rein it in a little bit so that the average audience member could, enjoy it as well and make it a little more mainstream.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of like Lady Stoneheart, literally a zombie that has to hold her neck so she can speak.
Yeah.
And I remember so well, we were wondering if they're going to bring her in. The actress, on a whim, posted on her Instagram like a picture of rocks shaped into a heart. Just because she's like, oh, look, it's heart-shaped rocks, whatever she thought it was cute. Holy cow, you don't know what kind of nerds. the amount we're subtly discussing, like, there's 14 hearts, there's 14 rocks. That means that there's going to be these people that are going to be here. And they're like, oh, you messed up.
In February of whatever, she sent up a picture of her, like, holding her neck. Like, oh, my God, that must have been her giving us a hint.
No, she just likes to be choked. Fuck.
Rickon, who I think... right. Rickon in the books, wild is that he's actually on the island of Skagos. It's an island with cannibals that ride on unicorns, and it's like you can't show that on TV. That's so silly.
It's a little too much.
Yeah, but there are a lot like White Harbor. I think is so freaking cool in the books, but it's just something you didn't have time for in the show. Mm-hmm. That's like this, like, oh, what about the Lannisters of the North? Because like, where's the North's money? They have their own version of the Lannisters. They're from White Harbor, the Marleys, I think it's called. And they'll work with the Lannisters just to screw them over and funnel money to the Starks. Like they're a really cool family, and I really wish they showed them more. Like they have like this one place that like literally they kind of keep as a prestige area where the king of the North came one time to like swear his fealty to them, and they look at the Starks as like brothers, and it's such a cool story. And they are the rich family of the area. So, but that's something you don't have time in the show.
Who was the Ironborn, I think Prince or King, who I think it was Varian or something like that, who would wear a full suit of armor and would jump from ship to ship and fight in armor. But, if he falls between the ships, he's going to drown. I was like, damn, that's such a cool character too.
What I love too is his brother, the one that we do get in the show. The whole subplot between the two of them is that he hates him so much because he stole his wife. And it's specifically told in the books, he took his wife because he has a bigger dick than him. And so, that's the whole thing, is that he's like, I'm this fierce warrior that jumps from ship to ship and blah, 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 blah. But man, I'm not packing a lot of heat.
We get it, brother. I understand.
The one more I want to add to this is the Dark Knight trilogy, because they're like, hey, we've done Batman to hell. How are we going to change it up? First off, you get Christopher Nolan. You get a good director first. And they made this kind of believable world. Even when Bane's blowing up the stadium, you're kind of like, if you're Bane, that makes sense. Bane being in this world kind of makes sense. How do you make Joker seem so believable? Yeah, this Joker seems somewhat believable. And I think that they took an adaptation from the comics. Like they pulled obviously from a lot of the earlier years, from not necessarily year one, but kind of the earlier stuff. And they made a Batman that I think is so the gold standard that all other Batmans now I compare to the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Batman, in my opinion. And they had all kinds of source material, and they cherry picked just the things that work well. And they built on it too. I can't imagine somebody's looking at Dark Knight and thinking, I don't know. I think I like the Batman in the comic books better. Right. Or I really like nipples on my suit, actually.
They're so useful. Yeah. I mean, at least if they were little antennas or something. Come on. Write that into the lore.
So one of the things we're pulling, we didn't mention it beforehand as much, but now once we're looking at some of our favorites, it sounds like one of the things that makes a good adaptation is removing things from the source material and adding things to improve it. Looking at the bad adaptations that we could think of, let's keep that in mind. And I'll go with the Hobbit Trilogy. I started with the Lord of the Rings Trilogy. I think a bad adaptation is the Hobbit Trilogy. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but they were so worried about packing in as much content as possible to make 3 movies out of a very short. I mean, it's like not a long book, guys.
Yeah, I read the books, so that's saying something.
Yeah, you and me both did before the movie came out. And it was originally going to be 2 movies, and they made it 3 movies. And when you're watching that, you're just like, we don't need all this extra stuff. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that they were so adamant about adding things to the source material that they lost a lot of what made the source material super good, which was this kind of fast pace. Each chapter has a beginning and an end to the story. It was really meant to be like read to your kids chapter at a time. And they kind of just decimated that by making this big grand story that felt, like a blob that was kind of just misshapen and moving in one direction. It wasn't really that great. And so I think The Hobbit was a bad trilogy. What do you guys got?
I got a shitty ass Street Fighter movie back in 2009.
Yeah.
I don't, and hopefully that's done properly with the last Street Fighter we were talking about earlier. Yeah. But yeah, oh my god, acting's horrible. The plot was garbage. Characters were not even faithful. It felt like it's just what was even the point of this? So this is what pulls people away from wanting to even spend money on these type of. Yeah, you're ruining it. I'd rather just go back home and play Street Fighter 6 and make my own lore.
It was nothing like the original game or anything like that, or any of the fun of the games, really.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. Don't want to ever see this shit again.
So it was hard for me trying to find bad adaptations, because if it looks bad, I just don't watch it. And that's the case for almost all of them that people had negative reviews. It's like, well, I can't really talk too much about that. I've never seen it. But I'm going to list a few anyways. Real quick. I don't think I saw the Assassin's Creed movie from 2016. But I heard that was one of them too. It's like, it looks familiar. I remember it had a certain actor. I remember.
Michael Fassbender.
Sure, probably him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Not
know.
that I seen it
I
twice or
never-
anything, but it's
Then-
still a shitty movie the second time.
The Giver, I remember reading the book and never watched the movie, and Ender's Game also. I read the book in school and never didn't watch the movie, but those were both reviewed as bad.
I will defend the Ender's Game movie as much as I possibly can because that is a hell of a hard story to pitch, and especially once you get to like the sequel books to that. But I will say that at the end of that, they still kind of land the point that it was bad that he was good at killing these bugs. I remember I showed that movie to Daniel, who was like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Oh, watch it. It's a good story." And by the end, he walked away with like a changed soul. It was funny how much
Sounds
he's
like a
just
Daniel
like.
move, though.
But he was like, wow, so he was a bad guy. I'm like, the nation was a bad guy, and he is becoming a guy. He ends up like leading them. But yeah, I think it was not bad. But Ender's Game is kind of a tough one to adapt. Actually, it deserves to be adapted into a show, not a movie. That way you can really let the characters breathe.
I think we're seeing a lot more success in making a series out of something than just a movie, because a movie is so compact. You have to hurry up and fit it in 2 hours, maybe 3 max, but it doesn't give you the growth and character development stuff that we love seeing now in even a mini series, 8 episodes or 6 episodes.
Yeah.
But the show that I really want to talk about, I love the show, but fans had a lot of complaints about it because it wasn't close enough to the source material, and that's Halo. We watched and talked about Halo a lot on here, and it's such a good, to me, it looked, especially visually, so accurate. And I think the biggest thing the fans didn't like is that the story didn't follow what they're expecting from the game. And that, especially with that one character, the girl, that it kind of deviated and followed her more.
Yeah.
Master Chief taking off his helmet so much and stuff. It's like, okay, I understand a lot of their complaints, but it's mostly just not sticking to the game closely enough, I think.
It pulled a lot from the books, and unfortunately, I think that show would have done a lot better if it just wasn't called Halo. If it was just something else, not about Halo, like the show actually, I think had a pretty good production.
Yeah. So it was a Starship Trooper branch off spinoff.
Yeah, that's another good. Oh God, that's a great adaptation. Actually, now that you're bringing it up, because it really like fixes the book actually, because the book's message is a little bit wonky. Anyways, but yeah, the Halo series, as much as we love Paramount around here, thank you for the sponsorship. The Halo series was a real misstep.
You know what's something that we need though, real quick? Since it was like a perfect almost adaptation, the movie was great. We need a Ready Player 2.
Yes. Oh my God. Supposedly they've been working on it for like 5 years, but
what are you writing a love story to Jonathan? Jesus Christ!
I'm
gonna go in and write it for them.
Pulling his pee this morning, so early.
Don't stop.
I just rewatched that first one, and I'm just like, this. I don't think the characters are very likable. I think he's too kind of teenage. I'm a rebel, but the world is super neat. I love the world.
Yeah, you know what? Scrap the movie. Make this into a full-fledged series. That's what we need.
There it is.
Because the world is what we want to stay in. We want to grow in that world.
Before, like 10 years ago, when you said there's going to be a video game adaptation, that was bad news. It was going to be bad. I think the Mario movie had a lot to do with that. Why are video game adaptations working now? The Last of Us and like the Detective Pikachu movie and stuff like that. Why are they working now and they didn't before?
I think because at least one of them at some point was successful, so they decided they can put money behind it. Because movie adaptations used to be the made-for-TV Sci-Fi Channel garbage, and now they're actually, okay, let's put $50 million or $100 million behind it because it's recognizable and we've seen it pays off before, so it's worth the investment in most cases.
Yeah, I think one of the big highlights is that they pull people who actually see why the game worked. So for The Last of Us, they have the game creator in the development team for that show. So he obviously knows what it's supposed to be like. And, other things too, I'm not necessarily pulling anything specific, but if we look at the Detective Pikachu one, clearly they got a bunch of younger audiences that grew up on Pokemon games to make it. Nobody grew up on Mario that made the Mario movie. Because that's impossible. But you could tell that's the case for the Pokemon movie. Like, oh, it's the whimsy, it's the world. The idea that you could be walking and seeing a Cubo and out in a field is almost the magic alone. You didn't really need to change too much after that. That was pretty big.
Glad you mentioned Detective Pikachu because it was on my honorable mentions list. Also, Tron is another one I didn't talk about, but I love the Tron
man,
movies.
give me another Tron. I love that Tron movie.
Yeah,
not an adaptation though.
Series, right? Aren't they working on more Tron?
No, they're working on Tron Ares is coming out this year.
Ares,
it's a
that's
third.
right.
What did you say, Frank?
It's not a series, or it's not an adaptation.
Not an adaptation. Was it? But yeah, I guess it's the same,
I guess
same
so.
medium. It's just a reboot or retelling the same.
Kind of like a number 2, right?
Yeah,
You know what?
it's a sequel
Yeah.
because it's the same actors. Jeff Bridges
Yeah.
comes forward from the old one.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there was a Tron in the 80s. Is
That's what I mean.
This Tron is based off of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more of a
Right, it's a sequel to the
number
80s
2,
one,
though.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tron Legacy is a sequel to the 80s one.
Yeah.
And the Tron Ares, I just wish it wasn't Jared Leto, but because he
Maybe
has
this will
not
be his
impressed me
chance to
since Dallas Buyers Club.
Redefine his career.
He had a lot of
I
changes.
hope so.
Let's start over. Come on.
But I'm just happy to have more Tron back. It's like one of those things where we'll be shouting from the roof. I mean, I know Daniel's going to pre-order his ticket, but the idea that they get into our world and then just seeing that like light cycle cut a cop car, I'm like, all right, you got it.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So yeah, guys, hit up our social medias. Let us know your guys' favorite adaptations or worst adaptations, and why you think they're working now and they didn't beforehand. I really like this discussion. We're going to try to do some more of these discussions going forward because I know that they make good YouTube videos, and it's just on a slow news day, it's perfect. It's good for us.